It is my belief that philosophy is first and foremost constituted not by answers but by questions. After all, in order to answer, one must first ask. And the question that intrigues me a lot is this one. Do current cutting-edge technologies, which essentially determine the transhumanist condition of the modern world, can in fact bring about ethical transformations that we could generally perceive as a shift from applied ethics to what I would call adaptive or adapted ethics? Answering this question requires an explanation of at least two things. First, what is the difference between these ethics? And second, why do I frame these potential ethical transformations as a threat? It is my hope that both of these things will become clear before I conclude my talk. The main goal of applied ethics is to determine appropriate practical behaviors in regards to particular existing or emerging phenomena, including phenomena related to modern technologies. One such contemporary phenomenon, rapidly gaining in both academic and popular interest, is the transhumanist project. There are a plethora of notions and definitions of transhumanism, but it can, in the most general sense, be described as an effort to employ scientific knowledge and technology to radically transform human existence by eliminating all physical and mental limitations inherent to us as species beings. Two ethical positions regarding transhumanism have formed. Yet, bioliberal, which emphasizes the positive possibilities of human development enabled by the transhumanist project, and bioconservative, which seeks to reveal current or inevitable negative consequences the project will cause for humanity. Although these positions are distinct from each other, both in their theoretical premises and practical implications, they are nevertheless based on the same classical ethical paradigm which posits that authentic human knowledge is or ought to be the basis of human agency. Accordingly, technologies, insofar as they express human agency, are treated as tools that should be subordinated to the human will. Nonetheless, it is my belief that such conception of ethics, constituted by a one-way relation between knowledge and agency, inevitably encounters conceptual challenges, as it is unlikely to adequately correspond to the anthropological, cultural, and socio-political condition of the heavily technologized modern societies. The optimistic vision of transhumanism is that of a radical technological remaking of the human pursued under the promise of near divinity. However, it is clouded by pessimistic considerations arising from an entirely different perspective of humanity's future, not a divine one, but lesser than that of an animal. Whichever of these visions will take hold, apologists of transhumanism, of course, claim that everything will turn out just fine. It is already clear that the fundamental transhumanist anthropological aim is a paradoxical one: to overcome humanness itself. This aim is indicated by the term of transhumanism itself. Humanness is a condition that must be transcended because humans are plagued by various imperfections, physical, mental, moral, and can overcome these imperfections only with the assistance of technologies. Best case scenario, humans become unconstrained by any inherent limitations, become something else than human, something other than what they are. This gradual transformation is denoted by the very category of transhuman. Likewise, the category of posthuman implies the fullest extent of it. Notably, transhumanist researchers, or at least some of them, prominent philosophers of transhumanism, admit that it is hardly possible, if at all, to answer the question of what empirical form or appearance the transhuman or the posthuman will take. In my opinion, this is not a mere coincidence or the result of our lack of imagination. This inability to describe the transhuman or a posthuman arises from the fact that humanness itself exists or is increasingly understood as an epiphenomenon of technology. This also applies to moderate transhumanist thinkers who envision an existential condition that is not completely incomprehensible to us. For example, Stefan Sorgner, one of the most acclaimed contemporary thinkers of transhumanism, introduces the concept of a weak transhumanism, which rejects the classical transhumanist belief that the posthuman condition will be ideal, a paradise on earth completely inconceivable to us now. Sorgner talks of something different, specifically that we humans are completely free to create ourselves with the assistance of science and technologies, unconstrained by any ideals. Sorgner develops this idea in one of his latest works, We Have Always Been Cyborgs. The content of the book confirms exactly what its title implies. Humanness itself unfolds in a very technological manner. By rejecting the idea of ideality of existential finitude in his considerations of transhumanism, Sorgner provided a truly original and valid interpretation of transhumanism which allows us to grasp its authentic ontology and state that transhumanism is, in principle, a never-ending process of humans constantly remaking themselves. Would everyone find such an image of the human acceptable, though? What ethical implications can be derived from the idea that the human is essentially technologized and can, in fact, be themselves considered a technology? Doesn't this technologization of the human itself becomes an ideal or even an idol, reducing in turn our very humanness to something to be sacrificed on its altar? It seems to me that in the face of the continuing development of the transhumanist project, such a prospect is very likely, as is the threat of applied ethics becoming adapted ethics. What does this transformation entail exactly? It can be described as a shift of the ethical center from the human to technology. In other words, it is the human who comes to serve technology, not the other way around. In this ethical perspective, the human becomes a mere epiphenomenon of technology and loses its traditional status of a willful subject. Let us quickly return to the issue of our mortality to better illustrate the point. I expect nobody would really argue that it is one of the fundamental facts of our existence. We are mortal. Transhumanism promises to deliver us from this shortcoming, or at least some transhumanist visions do. Who among us would say that this promise is not inherently seductive? After all, it echoes humanity's oldest desire, as betrayed by the Epic of Gilgamesh, the efforts of alchemists, Goethe's Faust, or Shelley's Frankenstein. What could not be what could be more obvious proof of our agency than a desire to persist internally and efforts to develop technologies capable of enabling it? And yet, is the human really the central agent in transhumanist visions? It is not the case that technology is the secret protagonist to which the human bows. There is a good reason to claim so. As I have already mentioned, there are prominent thinkers of transhumanism who openly admit that it is impossible to tell where exactly such efforts to remake the human will lead us. That is, if the so-called post-human of the future could still be considered human. I think this says a lot about the transhumanist view of humanness itself. Could it be that by putting all of our hopes in the technological liberation of the human, we are, in fact, becoming slaves of technology? Doesn't the ethical claim that humans must technologically overcome their limitations lead to us losing our authenticity and agency, risking to deny or even destroy our very humanness? By the way, it should be noted that what we call human limitations is largely also determined by our technological capabilities. For example, it wasn't long ago that we couldn't comprehend ourselves as being genetically limited. Today, however, not only can we do it, but we also can or will soon be able to modify ourselves genetically in various ways. Finally, let's ask ourselves, whose voice is the one saying this, our own or that of technology? Martin Heidegger understood the danger of technological determination very well. According to him, not only do we create technologies, we also become conditioned or even ruled by them. In turn, we begin to perceive the world in certain technological ways, which determines our actions. As such, the big question here is this one: do we truly willfully formulate and apply ethical norms in regards to the phenomena of reality, or are we merely adapting ethically to those phenomena in order to justify them? The issue of our mortality can serve as here as a valid starting point for considering this latter question. Heidegger himself viewed human mortality as a source of ethics. That is, our own existence becomes meaningful only in the light of its finitude. It is in the light of this finitude that we organize our actions accordingly, and it is in the light of this finitude that we acquire an obligation not only towards ourselves, but towards the other as well. And so, in conclusion, I want to ask you again, by refusing to see our own limitation as a source of ethics, and by treating technologies as a source of our liberation, are we not at risk of not only refuting our ethical status, but also, in a more general sense, complicating or even disrupting human relationships? First and foremost, by disrupting ourselves as humans. I think that this threat is a very real one, but consideration of this question would best serve as a topic for another talk. So thank you for your attention.